Okay, everyone, before you actually listen to this whole discussion, I originally recorded the main section of it, which is around 20 ish minutes. No, actually 30 minutes. I believe it's 30 minutes. But after I recorded that, there was a comment about questioning whether or not I was appropriating people being harsh toward Awada to people wishing death or cancer upon him. So I did rant. I'm giving you fair warning now. It's going to be the last 9 or so minutes of this because of how agitated that made me. And obviously, I recorded this all in 2023, but it didn't get released until 2024. And that happened simply because I was so agitated that I needed to take a day after doing that because it was going to be released on New Year's Eve. So I decided I'm going to take a day after that so I can let my mind come off of that. And people have been going at it in the comment section on that video. So I know I didn't mean to spark agitation among people, but opinions do that. But I will always say this, and I'll say it for everyone. Please do not take the context of something that someone has said and change the context of it. It's irritating. It's also disingenuous. And it's attributing things to people that they may not have actually said. Which was the major point of the first video in the first place. I'm pretty sure some people understood that. Not everyone. But even then, I reiterated it multiple times in comments. It's not funny. It's not cool to do. Whether somebody's trolling or not, that's not cool to do. And there's a difference between misunderstanding the context of something someone says, but when you place such a heavy emphasis on something that damning, that seems like intentional change up to me. Because I think most people could hear me say, don't change Aonuma's words around and run him into the ground like people did Awada before he passed away or up until he passed away, which was the truth of the time, 2015, that did happen. To saying, hey, you're out here wishing this man eternal illness and for him to be sick and you want him off the face of the planet. No, that's not what I'm saying. I understand, hey, people dislike certain things and certain changes, and then they get riled up and say, oh, you need to be fired. That's pressure on the person that you're saying that about. Maybe you're not saying it directly to them, but enough people doing that, it does become noticeable. And that was the thing I was critiquing. Everybody's different opinions on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom specifically. That wasn't my biggest issue. I understand that people are going to have differences of opinion and certain things are going to stand out more to certain people. That was never the issue, which is why I'm making sure I clarify this. And I think I did so multiple times in my rambling that you're going to listen to even now, what you're hearing me say. But I wanted to make sure that this was up front so everybody understood. This is probably going to be roughly 40 or so minutes altogether. But that's it for my. I'm not mathing it, I'm just guessing off the top of my head. But please, people, don't do that. Wait, please don't do that. I have a major issue with that for personal reasons. And if you're somebody who's used to people doing that to you, any sight of it can agitate you. So please, for the long run, especially if you're someone new to my channel, or like even people who've been here for a while, but if you're especially new to my channel, you will pick up on that I don't like that. And like my main purpose with this discussion was to kind of just like, hey, look, I didn't mean to be so aggressive. But I also did throw out some ideas as far as what I think would work for Legend of Zelda going forward to keep the new format, but also bring things into it that fans of the previous format enjoy without destroying the balance of the game too much. But with that said, we're just going to move on because I think I made this long enough. Hello out there, all you wonderful people. This is Andre, the Game I Dig. Thank you once again for lending me your time and your ear listening into another Game of Thoughts discussion. And I got to get right into this one because this is a general response, a general overview response to some of the responses I got back about my Zelda Grass Is Greener discussion. So I've been going back and reading some of the comments. First thing I want to do, because I didn't even realize it in how I was responding to some things, apologize to people because I may have come off a little gruff unintentionally. Just trying to be very direct. I know I can kind of come off as, oh, you didn't agree? Well, screw you. And that's not what I'm trying to do. And I did look at a couple of my comments. I was like, oh, crap, I was trying to respond to what was said. But if something to me felt like somebody was misconstruing my words, I tend to take a direct issue with that because there's something that's happened a lot in my life where people will take something I said and turn it into something I didn't say or repurpose the meaning of what I've said. So if I've come across to you like I'm being belligerent, I'm sorry, that was unintentional. Not something I do on purpose. I have a reactionary flare up that I'm still working through. Trying not to do that again, though. So, that said, I'm going to do this response and I'll try to make sure I get to everybody and let them know, hey, I'm putting a comment on the older video. And I'll let everybody know if you would like to hear what I have to say in response to this, because it's a lot of rebuttals and some points merge across lines for some things. So I'd rather just handle them all at once in a video or discussion versus individually responding multiple times to everything. So that's what I'm doing. Plus, it's good as a content creator to have another source of content. So I figured I'd do so. And this was seemingly for my channel one of the videos or the discussions that hit a little bit more heavily for people. So the first one that I'm going to, because I got the guy's general overall idea and response after reading what he said. And to shorten his premise, which hopefully I'm not bastardizing it, trying not to, but from what I'm understanding is he likes the idea of the engine, but he feels like a lot of stuff that made Zelda was left out of it. I can understand that. I can see that. I can see that point. Now, where I won't agree is saying that the creators of the series have doubled down on the idea of not bringing stuff back into the Zelda franchise, because playing both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, if you go through the games, you will find plenty of references to stuff from Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Spirit Tracks. So there's stuff in there that references the other games. Now, is it as distinct as the prior entries to the series? Maybe not. But they did just rebuild and I think there's somebody else did say it in the comments. It was sort of a soft reboot. And that soft reboot led to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom doing much better performance wise versus previous entries to the series. So for them, this looks like a good jumping off point to start working on more stuff. But as I said in the comments below, in the comment section on YouTube, they've always gone back to their previous games and looked at stuff, at least since Ocarina. They've always gone back to their previous games and looked at stuff from those games or things that they couldn't implement before and go ahead and say, yeah, well, we can do that this time around. Just like everyone. And this is for people who have liked the games and disliked the games. A lot of people are asking for a playable Zelda in a mainline Legend of Zelda game. Now, I could see the team working on a smaller sandbox, but I also think that the bigger sandbox is partly Monolith Soft's fault because they helped work on these two games. But I could see the team working with a smaller sandbox and potentially giving you two different versions of the same story. A version of the story from Link's perspective, then a version of the story from Zelda's perspective. Especially if this Zelda is more like Queen Zelda. And I'm going to always call her Queen Zelda from Hyrule Warriors because that's what she was originally called. And they called her Princess Zelda once they localized it here. But she was called Queen Zelda originally. So if they're going to do that, where she's a fighting character, like where she's trained in the rapier and the bow and arrow and stuff like that, I can see them doing two different storylines for her, or maybe depending on what they do with Impa, because Impa's changed multiple times. But if they decide that they're going to have like Impa train her and have her become Sheik again all over, they could have different variants of the story, different versions of the story for the characters. Whereas Link's story fills some holes here and Zelda's fills some holes there. This could also bring room for them to bring back some of the older gimmicks or some of the older quest items that were locked away from this game. Because I personally, I don't like the degrading and breaking weapons. I really, truly don't like that. But I can overlook that small issue if the other stuff in the game is good to me. And overall, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are fun games in the general sense. They're not as story heavy in a direct way, but you always, if you explore those worlds long enough, you do find hints of the story that's going on. From the connections to past iterations of Hyrule and stuff like that. So, yeah, I agree. Like, yeah, there are some things that they could definitely improve upon. Like, there's always room for improvement. But I don't agree that they're basically making The Legend of Zelda a stripped down RPG, because it's never been an RPG outside of Zelda 2, and that was an experiment that they never went back to. But I do understand where you're coming from. It's just like the things that you love about Zelda, the things that drew you into Zelda over a long period of time, you feel like those things are missing. And there are some people that do agree with that stance. I see that there are more references and hints to other things that have happened as far as things that we have been told about the story. So I guess maybe it's just the way we look at it. Like, I look at it from the perspective of, yeah, the lore is there, you have to find it. it's not going to sit and slap you in the face like it did in older games. Like, one of the things that a lot of people didn't realize about Ocarina of Time is if you wore the Mask of Truth and you interacted with the Sheikah stones, they actually told you things about the world, told you things that happened, gave you little tidbits of information that weren't a part of the main story, but were still very impactful for the Zelda series as a whole. And that's kind of how Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild both are. You don't get all of the story up front. You have to find it. Which, for some people, that's not the best thing to do. I get that. And I do hope that going forward, if they start working on smaller sandboxes, because they don't necessarily need to do a world as big as the version of Hyrule from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It's nice to see that they can do a world like that and still have a bunch of stuff that you can do in it. But at the same time, I do get, for a lot of people, that's a lot of tiring exploration. And a lot of people don't want to necessarily do that particular thing. At least not at the way you have to do it in both of those games. So, yeah. I get your point. Not trying to discredit it, but I do fundamentally disagree on some elements. If that's easier for people to get. And I don't mean to say it. Now I'm saying things I'm not intending to say. But I'm just saying, there's a balance to it. Somewhere they're going to find that balance. I mean, they kind of did it before with the top-down games, and that was A Link Between Worlds, where you had the openness of choice and everything, but you still had a smaller, contained world where a lot of things were happening and they were easy to get to. Like, you could walk Link from one side of the map to the other pretty quickly, as long as you had everything opened up. And I think that's what they really need to do with the next one. Go back to having the smaller biomes. Like, you could have the biomes be of decent size, but make them be the thing instead of just having the whole world be completely open. Like, have some barriers, but have barriers that you can easily traverse. I think would be the best balance of it. Now, the next one I'm going to respond to, this person, I think that they got the impression that I was thinking that everyone that complains about the newer games or complains about, like, the new game versus the old game for Zelda were the same people. And I think I clarified that, but I may have commented in a more aggressive manner than I was intending to. Again, my internal reaction is I don't like people mincing my words, and I think that was just a general understanding of where I was coming from versus someone intending to use what I was saying. My reaction internally was, okay, I don't like when people do this, so I'll admit, I got a little agitated. Human. Trying to fix that particular thing about myself, because again, personal experiences, I've had some people do that to me before on a regular basis, where they take my words out of context. And if you've experienced it multiple times over, it becomes an issue for you, or at least it did for me. So I've gotten into the mindset of being ready to say, no, this is wrong, that's not how I said that. And I need to take a step back, because I did look at how my comment came off, at least from me directly, and I'm like, oh no, Dre, that's not how not how you meant to respond. But they did say, okay, they did agree with the point then that I was making. Actually, let me get back on it. I personally see where people are coming from with the linear argument. I don't think it's something they can't fix or improve. But there was a satisfaction in the rules you were forced to play by in each dungeon in previous titles that the open method of the latest games doesn't offer. with that, I would agree somewhat and then disagree. It depends. Now, if we're talking about the way you had to get to all of them, like where you had to go the choice of the route how you went about taking them on, I disagree there. Well, no, I agree there because it having it be somewhat locked down can be helpful, especially when you run into a situation that you can't cross at that particular point in time. It's nice to be able to say, okay, I probably shouldn't be here. There might be something else I need. But with Tears of the Kingdom, each of the dungeons did have a specific theme and a set of rules that you had to work within in those dungeons. So they did improve that aspect from Breath of the Wild, where it was far more open in the way you handled the situation in dungeons, or what was to be considered dungeons, was far more open and you could just do anything to get through it. Now, in that sense, yeah, I would disagree because they did kind of tweak that in Tears of the Kingdom. Is it as restrictive as the older formula, like with Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Skyward Sword? No, it isn't. It is not as restrictive as those because in those instances, you needed the specific item that you get from those in order to be able to clear them. Whereas in Tears of the Kingdom, there was a set path and there were a certain number of things that you would have to do, but you didn't require a specific item for it. So, in that sense, yeah, I guess I do understand that that kind of takes away from people's overall enjoyment, but it shouldn't be as big of a pull because you can find other creative ways with the things that you do have in order to solve those puzzles. Now, I do think that they should limit the number of ways you can do that, and that will require people to start breaking certain things in the game in order to skip past that. Because I think, honestly, Tears of the Kingdom Breath of the Wild, the biggest thing that gets taken away from them is the speed running community. It's not going to be as strong for these games because of how they're built. And I love watching speed runs. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I enjoy watching the hell out of speed runs because you always, like, when there's restriction, people get creative in ways of how to get around those restrictions. And in that department, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild don't really have many. I mean, they do, again, as I said in the last discussion, there is a linear story that you can follow. It's up to you as the player to follow it. But it's not necessarily forced on you in what way to follow it. And that can be where things differ for certain people. I like the game being open. I like the series being open, but I do understand, like, yes, some linearity is necessary. Like with the tiers. It would have been nice if the tiers in each location just unlocked the memories in a particular order going forward versus each tier was a specific memory. If they had done it that way, there would have been a lot less for people to get disappointed by. Because I do know that that was a cause of issue for a few people. Like, the first tier I picked up was the one near that village that the Bokoblins took over. And it shows Ganondorf murking the queen. So it's like, oh, that was the first tier I found. So and that's because I went to that village looking for that fight, and that was a tough ass fight to go take on. It's one of my first big battles. I think I died like 20 times trying to complete that, only having like 5 hearts, because I could only get hit twice, and you had to literally wipe out all of the Bokoblins in order to complete that, in order for the village to open back up. And there were multiple times that I died to that one in the well because I got down to him last when I couldn't sustain a hit, and that motherfucker just knocked me out and made me restart the whole thing. So I can understand it from that standpoint, like where the tiers, the way the tiers operated wasn't exactly the greatest. Because if you could just grab any random tier and it just unlocked the next memory, that would have been awesome. Because then the story that you're trying to find itself is in a progression, a linear progression, instead of them being in specific locations. It's one of the things I think that was a thing that was a little off balance about how the game was produced, but it I don't know the specific reasonings for why they did it that way. So it's hitting blah, 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 hit and miss. I don't know why I got stuck trying to say that, but I do get it from that point. Um, Now there were several others, but I think the majority of people pretty much understood where I was coming from. There was, and I've just said it multiple times, so I covered this point. But there was someone that did respond to a comment I had made about them potentially going back and making a smaller sandbox world, but with the same engine and same improvements. That I think would strike a decent balance. Like I said, have your bigger world, but have it broken down into specific biomes, like they did with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask specifically. Like you have your big open area, which is Hyrule Field. You can have different little locations within Hyrule Field that are like different encampments and stuff like that to give the world more life. And then you could have Hyrule Castletown with all your different shops and things like that, and different people that you can run into. It could be like a hub that allows you to get different missions and things like that for the game, or different story bits that you wouldn't otherwise come across. Maybe have certain characters appear after you complete certain tasks, like having Kakariko Village and Death Mountain, and having the graveyards and stuff like that, having the sand area, having the Gerudo town and village and stuff like that, having a section for the Zoras, having a section for the Rito, obviously, because now you have all these different races in play, having the Kokiri forest and the Lost Woods and stuff, having all of that have its own section. So I would love to see them do that. And I think, honestly, that's probably going to be the next step. Now, I would like them to go back to having specific weapons and items instead of having the breakage system. But what I would like them to do is have an upgrade system for all of the weapons. Like, instead of having you get multiple different iterations of weapons and things, have you get the base weapon, and as time goes on, you need to improve it in order to be able to unlock different sections. Like they did with Majora's Mask with the Kokiri blade. Kokiri sword becomes the double edge blade, and then you get the final power up, and I can't remember the name of it, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. If you have all of the legendary weapons have an upgrade system to them, or even a weapon augmentation system, that could be the diversifying thing that you need versus having a ton of different weapons that you can combine together to create various effects. Even though that was awesome, that gimmick needs to stay with Tears of the Kingdom. It doesn't need to transfer over to the next game. And that's another thing. I don't think people understood, and in a general scope, but every Zelda game has its own gimmick. At least after A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, every Zelda game has had its own specific gimmick that you focus on. So for this one, I would like the augmentation system, like them to implement an augmentation system or upgrade system and have that be the defining gimmick for this particular Zelda title. Like, you don't even necessarily have to, like, not make the Master Sword be an item that has to be upgraded. Obviously, it's supposed to be what it is. And if we're going by Tears of the Kingdom, it was upgraded anyway. So, so you don't need to have an upgrade system for the Master Sword, but maybe if you did, have it be magical upgrades, things that you can add to the sword as enchantments, stuff like that. That would be cool. Honestly, I would like to see more magic back in the Legend of Zelda. I think it kind of did lose a little bit of that for Tears of the Kingdom, at least from the perspective of playing with Link. You lost some of that using elemental magic stuff because Link is capable of using magic. He just doesn't do it very often. Now, if we get a world where you're using a lot of magic with Link, I'd be for that. Or even if you don't have Link and they do implement Zelda in a playable role, let Zelda use all the magic. Here's a great idea, and it can combine the two things I was just talking about. You could have Link get weapon upgrades, and maybe just specifically the Master Sword gets magical augmentations instead of you upgrading the material of the Master Sword. Whereas Zelda can get different runes that give her magical abilities that get magical augmentations to them. And then she could get the light bow and arrow, and that could be a weapon upgrade system specifically for her. But that's me just running through things as far as the game is concerned. I'm not even dealing with story bound stuff right now. And yeah, a more concise story would be nice. I don't specifically need it because I'm one that's happy to explore the world and find the story. But I do think for the majority of people, they kind of need the story to be told to them. That's not a bad thing. I'm never saying that that's a bad thing. But they're two different styles. They're two different ideas and thought processes and patterns. So I wouldn't go ahead and say, yo, hey, you need to slap everybody in the face with the story, but make it easier to find the important bits of the story. Like, once you complete a certain section and you get the particular item that you need from that section, and you go back to Hyrule Castle Town because you need to get more information, you go to different shops, talk to the different shopkeepers, they'll be able to direct you to certain people with particular information that you need and stuff like that. That would, in and of itself, would perpetuate the story. And yeah, it gives you a mission system that's akin to what both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom did, but it also makes it easier for the player to understand, oh, I need to go here to this spot and get this, and then just have it highlighted on your map. And obviously, I would like the map to work like the system in Tears of the Kingdom, where once you get to a location, you get the map from that location, then it opens the map for you to actually see it. So that would be cool. But that's me talking ahead of everything, and I'm now getting away from the generalized discussion I was trying to have and diving into throwing in my own ideas, which wasn't actually my intention, just kind of spilled into that. But I hope I did at least clarify the points for people. And again, I did want to apologize. I know I kind of came off a little gruff. Uh, didn't mean to, but I know I did. Being passionate about something and being in the moment and then having my own personal thing that I explained, that could be a bad combination. So I did want to cover that. I wanted to make sure. I'm not saying, yo, hey, I'm not saying I did not say what I intended to say with that discussion, but I do understand where it could sound like I'm saying multiple things that I'm not when I listen back to it. I did 2 listens back when I got the message about the specific thing that they thought that they seemed like that was the impression that they were getting. I went back and listened for that specific thing. Didn't find it. Then I did a listen back to see if what I said could sound that way, which is funny because I did say that we need to start being hyper specific when I said the popular niche opinion. And then I get basically caught up in not being hyper specific. So it's like, oh, that's what happened. Um, so in a way, yes, I did definitely misspeak, but I wasn't intending to make it sound like, oh, all of these people are the same people. I know that as things happen, we get different groups of people that just end up in the same camp and it rotates out. Like, for instance, I could say the people that said that they want Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask back when they saw Wind Waker ended up going to the next game, not all of them, and saying, well, nah, Wind Waker was better than what Twilight Princess ended up being. It's not going to be everybody. That's quite obvious. But it's just the fact that the thing that is in and of itself keeps happening, where you hear like this group strongly say, well, no, screw this. I want that back. And then the next thing comes out, and then you hear the same type of thing go backwards. And you say, like, well, no, screw this game. I want that one. And it just came out sounding more like I was saying that the group is always the same people. It's not always the same people. It's just that the sentiment, for the most part, comes off the same. I think I wasn't clarifying that point, so I was making sure I did clarify that toward the end of this, because I might have rambled over that into the ideas. That's something I do. If you're new here, I apologize. It's just who I am. I ramble a lot, even more specifically when it's something I really like. But getting back to that point, I can understand when I said those things on top of each other. That's probably why it sounded like that. But in my mind, the way I'm talking, I've watched a lot of debates and I started talking in that sort of mindset. Like if I'm saying when I'm talking, especially more so when I'm doing videos or discussions, when I'm talking in the idea of it being like a debate. So if I didn't say it, if I didn't specify that thing, then that's not what I'm saying. But in a general sense, most people aren't thinking like that. And my mind will go to, well, then you're just mischaracterizing me, what I'm saying. And that happens on me doing a discussion about someone's statements being miscategorized. So I'm like, oh, I see what I did wrong here. So again, that's why I can't. I started out with the apology saying, I didn't mean to come off that way. And I'm reading back at my comments. That's what it looks like. So making sure I clarify that. But I know I rambled on, but hopefully the things I was trying to say actually got through. If they didn't, I will do my best to clarify them. Otherwise, thank you guys very much for listening in. Keep your eyes and ears up for more stuff from me. And until the next time, enjoy games. Peace out, everybody. Okay, so I have to add something on to the end of this because less than 24 hours after I recorded the main part that you listened to prior to this, someone took a statement where I was specific enough in what I said and turned the context around on it. So for all of the people that listened, even with the comments that disagreed with many of the things I said, no one else said this but one particular person. And I need to address that immediately. I did already in a comment that same night. But when I referenced that fans ran Iwata into the ground up until he died, that's the truth. Now this person turned turned it with the question asking if I'm implying that fans gave or wished cancer upon Iwata. I never said that. Never once said anything in that realm or that region of thought. One, because it's absurd to say that. Two, I was talking about everything that went down from 2013 up until 2015 when he passed away. Now, I don't know if everybody's up to date on their information, but you can literally look up Awada was hated in Google and find tons of results from that time frame on different discussion boards, different articles. Hell, if you did it on YouTube, you could probably find tons of videos from that time frame with people talking about how much they hated Awada, how he needed to be stripped of his position and removed from power as CEO of Nintendo. That type of thing can stress the fuck out of a person. It can run their it could do things to you. Like stress does things to you physically. Stepping away from the fact he had developed cancer. That's wholly different. He developed bile duct cancer, which is a rare cancer. That in and of itself is dangerous alone. It's treatable. It's very dangerous though. But add the stress of trying to run a company and knowing everything the fans were saying about him at the time, as well as gaming media. I mean, Michael Pachter, even after he died, said the late and not so great Iwata. So, when I spoke about that specific thing, I meant that specific thing. There's no, oh, we're crossing the line into why he passed away. I didn't say why he passed away. I said he was run into the ground up until he passed. And you could basically do the same thing to Aonuma by misconstruing what he said and taking his words and misrepresenting them, which is exactly what kept happening with Iwata in the first damn place. But people forget this. I didn't. I lived it. I was there for most of those discussions, trying to get people to understand that, like, yo, hey, there's a lot going on here. He's already had 3 other platforms be successful. Hell, there's even a board right now. I'm pretty sure it's on GameFAQs. If you go look it up about why people hate Iwata, there's a dude who posted on there that said that he came in during the middle of the Wii's development and became CEO, which is untrue since he took over in 2002. And even if he didn't, he would have been on the team working on the damn console in the first place. So he would have been there from the beginning of it anyway. But he came in at a time where Nintendo were developing a platform that was going to be successful anyway. He would have had input on that successful console. Not the Wii U, the Wii. He would have had input on that successful console, the Wii and the DS. He would have had major input on it because he was still a major part of Nintendo at the time. But I don't like when people take my words and turn them to mean things I didn't say. And I was just talking about that in the previous part of this. Now, the people listening probably get why I have a dislike for that, have a distaste for that, especially after this particular thing. And it's stuff like that that happens on a regular basis. That's one of the reasons Nintendo came up with Nintendo Directs, because people kept misrepresenting what they were saying or mistranslating or even attributing things that were said by one party to another party and then taking said statements out of context. I have a whole video on people talking about Miyamoto for Star Fox Zero and misrepresenting and saying that a member of Platinum said that it was hard to work with him when it was a member of the Nintendo scene that just said, hey, the workflow is intense. That's the thing that I'm irritated by. I don't care that people have their particular opinions. Everyone's going to have their opinions. I'm more worried about how people take those opinions or even a misrepresentation of something and allow that to forge their opinion. If you want to have your opinion, cool. I'd rather your opinion be on at least information that is valid as possible. Like information that doesn't miss the context of something that was said. That was the whole point of my daggone video. Yeah, I may have gone off on little tangents. I do that. That's something I do personally. But the whole point of my video was that things were being taken out of context. There's even an article right now, I can't remember what platform it is on, that references people taking things out of context from that daggone IGN interview. That's what I was talking about. I'm trying to make that as clear as possible for people to understand. But if I reference something and I am speaking in a particular context, please do not try to change the context of what I'm saying. I never said fans gave or wished cancer upon Iwata. I was just talking about how disrespectful the fans were up until the man passed away because one platform underperformed. One. And his philosophy at the time was right. Because now you have people talking about, hey, Sony and Microsoft should start making smaller games, which is something I've been saying for a while now. But Sony and Microsoft should be making smaller games and stop trying to worry about huge budgets. And now that, what was it, $100 million is a mid-tier budget for Sony? Now people are realizing exactly what the fuck Iwata said. Before, they laughed him out the room for making the same suggestions that they're all suggesting now. That was my damn point. I don't like when things are misrepresented. Because with misrepresentations becomes a lot of misinformation, and with a lot of misinformation, people will dogpile on something or someone under the wrong pretext. And yeah, who knows? Maybe if Iwata was less stressed out, he would have had longer on this plane of existence. We don't know. But I am very certain that the stress levels of everything going on didn't help him. And him knowing the last things that he saw from the fans that he so wanted to make happy was that they were highly disappointed in him and didn't give a fuck about him. That's why I hate fucking miscontextualization.